a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. The Man in the High Castle, TV series. The Man in the High Castle is an American television series depicting a dystopian alternate history. Created by Frank Spotnitz, the program is produced by Amazon Studios, Scott Free Productions, Headline Pictures, Electric Shepherd Productions and Big Light Productions. The series is based on the 1962 eponymous novel by Philip K. Dick. In the alternative 1962, the Axis powers have won World War II and divided the United States into the Greater Nazi Reich, comprising more than half of the eastern part of the continent and the Japanese Pacific states to the west. The territories are separated by a neutral zone that encompasses the Rocky Mountains. The series follows characters whose destinies intertwine after they come into contact with a series of propaganda films that show different history. Premiering in January 2015. The pilot was Amazon's most watched since the original series development program began. The next month, Amazon ordered a 10-episode season, which was released in November to positive reviews. A second season of 10 episodes premiered in December 2016, with a third season announced a few weeks later and released on October 5, 2018. On July 21, 2018. It was announced at San Diego Comic-Con that the series had been renewed for a fourth season. Season 1. The central characters are Juliana Crane, Frank Frink, Joe Blake, John Smith, Nobusuke Tagami, and Takeshi Kido. The series takes place in an alternate 1962. Juliana Crane is a San Francisco woman who becomes entangled with the resistance when her half-sister Trudy is killed by the just after she gives Juliana a film reel that contains newsreel-style footage. Entitled The Grasshopper Lies Heavy, it depicts an alternate history in which the Allies won World War II and Germany and Japan were defeated. It is part of a series of similar newsreels being collected by someone referred to as the Man in the High Castle. Juliana believes the newsreel to reflect some sort of alternate reality, and that it is part of some kind of larger truth about how the world should be. Her boyfriend, Frank Frink, who keeps his Jewish roots hidden to avoid extradition and death at the hands of the Nazis, believes that the newsreel has no relation to real-life events. Juliana learns that Trudy was carrying the film to Cannon City, Colorado, in the neutral zone, where she was going to meet someone. Juliana decides to travel there in Trudy's place to find out what her half-sister's mission was. When she arrives in Cannon City, she encounters Joe Blake. Joe is a 27-year-old New Yorker who is a double agent working for the Nazis under John Smith, a former U.S. Army officer who joined the Nazis and rose through the ranks to become a senior officer in the SS. Joe is pretending to be a member of the resistance while he searches for the resistance contact in Cannon City, which is Juliana, who replaces Trudy. Nobusuke Tagami is a high-ranking Japanese official, the trade minister. In San Francisco, he meets in secret with Nazi official Rudolf Wegener, who is traveling incognito as Swedish businessman Victor Baines. Tagami and Wegener are both concerned about the power vacuum that will exist when the Reichsfuhrer, Adolf Hitler, either dies or is forced to step down, because of his worsening Parkinson's disease. Wegener explains that Hitler's successor will want to use the Reich's nuclear bombs against Japan to gain control of the rest of the former United States. Currently, however, Japan and the Third Reich are engaged in a Cold War that is full of tension, but no open warfare, with the Japanese lagging behind the Germans technologically. Frank ends up being arrested when the Japanese and the Nazis become suspicious of Juliana's activities. Not having the information they seek, he is unable to give the Japanese what they are looking for. They kill Frank's sister and her 2 children in retaliation, using their Jewish heritage as an excuse for their executions. This leads Frank to plan to kill the visiting Japanese crown prince and princess, but he ultimately finds himself unable to execute the plan. Season 2. The second season encompasses Frank's decision to forego his hesitancy and relative pacifism and become a committed member of the American resistance to the Japanese Empire inside the Pacific States. He eventually participates in a successful terrorist bombing of a Central Command building of the Pacific States government in downtown San Francisco. The attack kills many members of the Japanese military and other top-level leadership. Juliana Crane claims asylum in the Nazi Reich by using its San Francisco embassy so that she can escape Japanese soldiers who hold her responsible for at least one murder. John Smith, seeing that her asylum claim is unlikely to succeed, steps into the interrogation room and assumes command of her claim himself, sponsors the claim himself, and takes her to New York without Joe Blake's knowledge. Joe discovers that he was a product of the Lebensborn program and is the sole biological son of a top-ranking Nazi official in Berlin, Martin Herzmann. Eventually, Joe reconciles with Herzmann on a personal level and becomes second in command of the chancellorship after Hitler dies. Hitler named Herzmann the acting chancellor of the Reich when he fell ill, so after Hitler's death, Herzmann assumes the role until the Nazi Party can meet and select his successor. Hitler's death is abruptly pinned on Japanese spies and Herzmann suddenly announces on television that the Japanese agents who, he claims, assassinated the Führer will be brought to justice by any means necessary, including war. John Smith is the only high-ranking Nazi official to be suspicious of the nature of Herzmann's sudden announcement. To understand why it has happened, he interrogates another high-ranking Nazi, Reinhard Heydrich, who reveals a far-reaching conspiracy led by Herzmann that is designed to result in a Nazi nuclear onslaught against the Japanese Empire that will kill tens of millions of Japanese, decimate their empire, level Tokyo, kill the emperor, and force the surviving Japanese to absorb themselves into a global Nazi Reich and strengthen Herzmann's position. John Smith undertakes carefully calculated actions to disrupt and dismantle the Herzmann conspiracy and finally travels to Berlin and informs Heinrich Himmler, the Nazi Reichsführer, who is not involved, of the existence of the conspiracy. Audio tapes, together with physical and written evidence that reach too deeply within the existing Reich's power structure to be dismissed as hearsay, are handed personally over to Himmler by Smith, who then leads Smith and several of his closest Berlin subordinates into the late Hitler's office, which is occupied by the acting chancellor. Himmler arrests Herzmann for high treason and the murder of Hitler, detains Joe along with Herzmann, and then addresses the Volksschau, packed with hundreds of thousands of Reich civilians and uniformed stormtroopers, nixing the speech declaring war, which would have been delivered by Herzmann. Himmler instead informs the Reich of Herzmann's conspiracy and of Smith's exposure. The entire Volksschau erupts in a celebratory mood that is marked by repeated mass Nazi salutes of Himmler's men, in general, and then of Smith, in particular. The season ends with Himmler and Smith implicitly assuming command of the Reich, and an implied new era of peace and tranquility between the Japanese Empire and the Greater Nazi Reich. Juliana Crane continues to live out her asylum claim inside New York Nazi territory, and the final few minutes of the final episode of the second season show Trudy alive and well, in a basement somewhere. Smith is given access to a room filled to bursting with reels of films that were watched by the late Führer. Production. In 2010, it was announced that the BBC would co-produce a 4-part TV adaptation of The Man in the High Castle for BBC One together with Headline Pictures, Fremantle Media Enterprises, and Scott Free Films. Director Ridley Scott was to act as executive producer of the adaptation by Howard Brenton. On February 11, 2013, Variety reported that Sci-Fi was adapting the book as a 4-part miniseries, with Ridley Scott and Frank Spotnitz as executive producers, co-produced with Scott Free Prods, Headline Pictures and Electric Shepherd Prods. On October 1, 2014, Amazon.com began filming the pilot episode in Roslyn, Washington, for a new television drama to be aired on their Prime web video streaming service. This has been adapted by Frank Spotnitz and is being produced for Amazon by Ridley Scott, David Zucker and Jordan Sheehan for Scott Free, Stuart McKinnon and Christian Bouter for Headline Pictures, Isa Hackett and Kaylan Egan for Electric Shepherd and Spotnitz's Big Light Productions. The pilot episode was released by Amazon Studios on January 15, 2015. Amazon Studios' production process is somewhat different from those of other conventional television channels. They produce pilot episodes of a number of different prospective programs, then release them, and gather data on their success. The most promising shows are then picked up as regular series. On February 18, 2015, Amazon.com announced that The Man in the High Castle was given the green light along with 4 other series, and a full season would be produced. Production for the pilot episode began in October 2014. Principal filming took place in Seattle, with the city standing in for San Francisco and locations in New York City, as well as Roslyn, Washington, which was the longtime shooting location for Northern Exposure. Sites used in Seattle include the Seattle Center monorail, the Paramount Theater, a newspaper office in the Pike Place Market area, as well as various buildings in the city's Capitol Hill, International District, and Georgetown neighborhoods. In Roslyn, the production used external shots of the Roslyn Cafe, which featured prominently in Northern Exposure along with several local businesses and scenery. In April 2015, filming took place in Vancouver, British Columbia, in the downtown area of West Georgia Street, along the promenade of the Coast Capital Savings Building. In May and June 2015, filming also took place at the University of British Columbia. Exterior shots of Hohenwerfen Castle in Werfen, Austria, were filmed in September 2015 for the 10th episode of the first season. Amazon announced that they were bringing on new executive producer and showrunner Eric Overmyer for the 3rd season to replace Frank Spotnitz after his sudden departure from the show during the middle of the 2nd season. Reception. The first season received widespread acclaim from critics. Rotten Tomatoes gives it an approval rating of 95% based on reviews from 58 critics, with an average rating of 7.54 out of 10. The site's critical consensus states, by executive producer Ridley Scott, The Man in the High Castle is unlike anything else on TV. With an immediately engrossing plot driven by quickly developed characters in the fully realized post-World War II dystopia. Metacritic gives the first season a score of 77 out of 100, based on reviews from 30 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews. Meredith Werner from IO9 wrote, "I can honestly say I loved this pilot. It's an impressive, streamlined undertaking of a fairly complicated and very beloved novel." Matt Fowler from IGN gave 9.2 out of 10 and described the series as a superb, frightening experience filled with unexpected twists and turns. Brian Moylan of The Guardian was positive and praised the convincing depiction as well as the complex and gripping plot. The Los Angeles Times described the pilot as provocative and smartly adapted by the X-Files' Frank Spotnitz. The Daily Telegraph said it was absorbing, and Wired called it must-see viewing. Entertainment Weekly said it was engrossing and a triumph in world-building, cheering, "The Man in the High Castle is king." After the season, Rolling Stone included it on a list of the 40 best science fiction television shows of all time. Amazon subsequently announced it was the service's most streamed original series and had been renewed for a 2nd season. The 2nd season was met with mixed reviews. Rotten Tomatoes gives it an approval rating of 63%, based on reviews from 19 critics with an average rating of 6.86 out of 10. The site's critical consensus states, although its plot is admittedly unwieldy, The Man in the High Castle's 2nd season expands its fascinating premise in powerful new directions, bolstered by stunning visuals, strong performances, and intriguing new possibilities. Metacritic gives Season 2 a score of 62 out of 100, based on reviews from 10 critics. Advertising controversy. As part of an advertising campaign for the release of the first season, an entire New York City subway car was covered with Nazi and Imperial Japanese imagery, as seen in the show, including multiple U.S. flags with the Nazi eagle emblem in place of the 50 stars and multiple flags of the fictional Pacific states, in response to criticism from state lawmakers and city leaders. The Metropolitan Transportation Authority released a statement saying that there were no grounds to reject the ads, because the neutral content subway ad standards prohibit only advertising that is a political advertisement or disparages an individual or group. MTA spokesperson Kevin Ortiz stated, "The MTA is a government agency and can't accept or reject ads based on how we feel about them. We have to follow the standards approved by our board. Please note they're commercial ads." Spokesperson Adam Lisberg said, "This advertising, whether you find it distasteful or not, obviously they're not advertising Nazism. They're advertising a TV show." After complaints from New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo and New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio, initial reports indicated that Amazon pulled the advertisement from the subway. It was later announced that it was the MTA, not Amazon, that pulled the ad, because of pressure from Cuomo. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like to know more?